I never thought I'd feel so invisible in my own marriage. When I married Eric 5 years ago, I truly believed we'd spend a lifetime growing closer. But lately I felt more like a roommate than a wife. He was always on his phone, always working late, and even when he was home, it felt like his mind was somewhere else. I tried everything: new dinners, spontaneous date nights, even dressing up the way I used to when we first met, but it was like I was talking to a wall. The only person who ever seemed to notice how distant things had become was Eric's father, Richard. He'd come to stay with us for a few weeks after minor surgery and was resting in our guest room downstairs. At first, I thought it would be awkward, having a family member under the same roof while we were clearly having issues, but Richard turned out to be more aware and attentive than I'd expected. Started subtly. I'd be in the kitchen cleaning up dinner plates alone, again, and he'd come in and quietly help me dry the dishes. I'd make coffee in the morning and find him already brewing a fresh pot for both of us. He noticed when Eric didn't come home until midnight and offered me a soft, knowing smile as if to say, "I see what's happening, even if he doesn't." One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the back patio, lost in thought, holding a cup of tea I hadn't touched in 10 minutes. Richard stepped outside, wearing a comfortable gray cardigan, and sat beside me. "You okay, Madison?" he asked. I hesitated, not sure how honest I could be. "Just tired," I said with a faint smile. "Long day." He nodded, watching me. "You know, I may be old, but I'm not blind. I see how hard you're trying. And I see how much he's pulling away." I felt a lump in my throat. I don't know what else to do. It's like he's not even here anymore. Like I'm shouting into a void. Richard looked at me with a gentle seriousness. "You deserve to be seen, Madison. You deserve someone who listens, someone who values the effort you put in." His words hit me harder than I expected. I'd been bottling it all up for so long that just hearing someone validate my feelings made me want to cry. Over the next few days, Richard continued to be a quiet presence of comfort in the house. He helped me water the plants, made jokes to lighten the air, and even encouraged me to take breaks from cooking. "Let's order in tonight," he'd say with a grin. "You're not anyone's maid." Meanwhile, Eric remained in his own world. Even when he was home, he'd retreat into his office with the door closed. No kisses. No questions about my day. No attempt to connect. One evening, Richard and I sat watching an old movie on TV. Eric had texted me he'd be late again, something about a meeting running over. I didn't even bother replying. "I don't mean to pry," Richard said softly, eyes on the screen, "but I need you to know something. My wife, Eric's mother, she spent the last 10 years of our marriage trying to get my attention. I was always working, always building the business. I thought I was doing it for the family. But looking back, I was missing everything that mattered. She died thinking she wasn't enough. And I'll never forgive myself for that." I turned to him, heart heavy. "I'm so sorry, Richard." He shook his head. "I just don't want to see it happen again." His words stayed with me that night. The next morning, I woke up and Eric had already left for work. No note, no goodbye. Just an empty side of the bed. I went down to the kitchen and found Richard pouring me a cup of coffee. "Sleep okay?" he asked. I nodded. "As well as I could." He handed me the mug and touched my hand gently. "If you were my wife, I'd never let a day go by without reminding you how much you matter." I looked at him, stunned. "Richard." He smiled sadly. "I know it's not my place. But I see you. I just wanted you to know that." The day passed slowly. I did laundry, tidied the house, and tried to distract myself. But his words kept replaying in my head. No one had spoken to me like that in years. It wasn't even flirtation, it was respect. Something I hadn't felt in so long. That evening, Eric finally came home. Face buried in his phone, a distracted "hey" tossed in my direction before disappearing upstairs. I sat at the dining table alone while Richard quietly joined me. "I'm sorry," I said after a long silence. "This is weird, isn't it? You being in the middle of this." He shook his head. "No. What's weird is watching a good woman be treated like she's disposable." Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. I don't know how much more I can take. Richard stood, walked around the table, and gently placed his hand on my shoulder. Then maybe it's time you stop waiting for him to change. That night, I lay awake for hours. Eric didn't come to bed until after 2 a.m., smelling like whiskey and laughing at something on his phone. I turned away, clutching the blanket tight. The next morning, I packed a small bag and went to stay at my sister's house. I left a note for Eric. Nothing dramatic. Just the truth. I can't keep loving someone who's not trying to love me back. Richard texted me later that day. Just 3 words, "You were brave." Few weeks passed. Eric didn't call. I guess that told me everything I needed to know. But Richard did. He checked in often, asked if I was eating, if I was taking care of myself. We met for coffee one afternoon, and it was the first time I felt like smiling in a long time. We talked for hours. About books, travel, the dreams we'd both buried over the years. It was easy with him. Effortless. One day, while walking through a quiet park, Richard turned to me and said, "I never expected to feel this way again. But being around you, it's like I woke up." I was quiet for a moment. "It's not wrong to want to feel appreciated," I whispered. His hand brushed against mine. "It's not wrong to want to feel loved." We didn't rush anything. We just spent time together, getting to know each other not as in-laws, but as 2 people who had both been lonely for too long. Eventually I filed for divorce. It wasn't messy. It wasn't emotional. Eric signed the papers and barely said a word. By the time spring arrived, Richard and I had built something real. We laughed more. We danced in the kitchen while making breakfast. We went to art museums, watched late-night documentaries, and started planning trips we'd always wanted to take. One day, while watching the sunset from his back porch, he turned to me with tears in his eyes. "You saved me," he said softly. "And I hope I saved you too." Maybe love doesn't always come the way you expect. But sometimes, it finds you when you're brave enough to stop waiting for someone who forgot how to see you.